This is a Crypto Legends podcast.
Hi, everybody. This is Adam Bialy from Fiat Republic, and you're listening to the Crypto Legends podcast, the show where we meet the legends and creators of Web3. Today, we welcome Andrej Majcen, Chief Client Officer and co-founder at Bitcoin Suisse. Bitcoin Suisse, Switzerland's first crypto exchange in 2013, has seen the disaster of Mt. Gox and Celsius today alike, right? Which is quite a interesting lifespan. Bitcoin Suisse is part of the crypto history and is writing it very much so. Andrej and his team are guided by the principle that to make cryptocurrency professional, you need to be professional yourself. And Bitcoin Suisse is quickly establishing themselves as safe, secure, and customer-first crypto platform. Welcome, Andrej.
Thanks a lot for having me, Adam. Glad to be here. Super excited.
Thanks for joining us. I'd like to start with you basically telling me a bit of a story. Before Bitcoin, before crypto, what was your background? It looks like it was in security, right? What's the story there?
It actually was in security, but not as most people would think now in IT or cybersecurity, but actually in physical security. So I was a student back in the days studying economics, and then later on accounting and finance. I somehow had to finance actually university and tuition fees and so on. So since I did the military, like every male has to do here in Switzerland, I then had a little bit of background within physical security, and then I joined a security firm here. Later on also worked for an international company, or actually event, called the World Economic Forum, also in physical security, where I had a chance to travel around and actually be at very exciting events. So that's more or less the security part. But when it comes to what I learned there, it's of course, it was super interesting to be with all kind of different peoples. And that was, in my point of view, a great school of life that is also super valuable nowadays in my role as a chief clients officer.
Great. And what is Bitcoin? So after that episode or that part of your story, how did you get into Bitcoin? Where does Bitcoin pop up on your sort of resume?
That's a good question. Actually, a friend of mine that also worked for a SaaS security firm and that also studied together with me, Fabian Hediger, he's a co-founder as well of Bitcoin Suisse, and at one point he said, or he was all of a sudden talking about blockchain technology. He read some articles and so on. He was super fascinated. And at the same time, we were sitting at the university looking at the Gartner hype cycle back in 2013. And there were all kind of crazy technologies like, 3D printing, smart tasks, cloud computing, and so on, but nothing about blockchain technology. And he thought, this would be a great moment and interesting to invest into this blockchain technology. But of course, back at the time, that was somehow difficult in itself, but there was like Bitcoin around as a currency. And then he tried to look around where could he do some investments. And since he didn't really like the platforms he was looking at online, at least like Mt. Gox and the likes of them, then coincidentally he found actually Niklas Nikolaisen, who is the founder of the company, just starting his little venture here, just created a new company and so on. Then he was in the process of creating a company, and then he met him and bought some Bitcoin from him, like privately. And then at the same time, Niklas said, "Hey, you're a student. I could use some part-time support, like half a day per week or so on." And then, one thing led to another. Fabian told me. I then also bought some Bitcoin from Niklas. He offered me the same job, and then we started both to work for him. But back in the days, we didn't really have any kind of structures, no plan, no idea. But it was like a part-time job. Then very soon escalated into a full-time venture.
Don't tell me you were one of those that bought like a pizza for 1,000 Bitcoin.
I can tell you the same story with Eve, and I unfortunately did. I sold a lot of them to actually buy a watch, but that's a different story. On Bitcoin, when I entered Bitcoin, I think it was around already $500-600, and then it went up the first kind of bull run to I think $1,300. Then it collapsed again to something below $200. But at the time, I mean, I just was fascinated by the idea of decentral money, of the technology itself, even though I understood probably only 10% of it. But decentral kind of money, decentral systems was at the end of the day what fascinated me. Plus to actually do what we learn at university, like in theory, to do it actually in practice and build up a company. That was also super fascinated. But I didn't consider myself at the time like a large scale investor. I think nobody was.
Makes sense. Makes sense. No, that's really fascinating. And you were basically you were the first crypto firm, right? In Switzerland in 2013. So I mean that's now 9 years ago. In the world of crypto, it's ages. It's like eons even. So how was it back then? Because many people are saying it was wild. It was the Wild West, and no one knew what this is going to become. How was it to you, or how was it from your perspective?
Yeah, it was indeed Wild West in terms of there was basically no infrastructure. So, and we were indeed the first crypto firm in Switzerland. But also when like Nicholas, Fabian, and myself, we met and we all were fascinated by the idea, but we couldn't really capture it. And we said we need to do something within that space. And obviously, like providing financial services was our primary target. But I mean, it was so early stage, and at the end of the day, what we did is we went to some kind of meetups, crypto meetups that already existed back in the days in 2013 that were organized by the Bitcoin Switzerland Association. And the founder of that association is actually our today's chairman. So he was one of the first people that I ever met in the crypto scene Switzerland. But it was basically a bunch of IT computer nerds hanging around at the restaurant or at the cafe, philosophing about cryptocurrencies, the world, I don't know, kind of tinfoil headish ideas sometimes. And but it was interesting. It was super good platform for me at the end of the day also to learn something and to be engaged in that kind of scene. But when it comes to infrastructure, there was really not much around, and we were the first ones that actually provided some sort of professional services and financial services to the broader community. Because one of the problems also when we at the beginning wanted to buy Bitcoin ourselves was that you had a few platforms online like Mt. Gox, and there was maybe Bitstamp, Local Bitcoin, and so on. But all of them were not really, let's say, intuitive directly, and also looked a little bit dodgy in the early years. And then really to step in and break a little bit that kind of anonymity on of a platform or a website in itself. And we said, hey, we have a Swiss-based company here that we found that we have a physical address. We put it on the website. We have a phone number. People can call us. Nobody's like hiding their faces behind the platform or a website. And people then also used that and actually really came to our office. And sometimes they didn't want to leave before they had like 6 confirmations on the blockchain because they thought, we will rip them and so on. So they were camping at the office all the time. And
that is very interesting. This is very similar, as in when you now see crypto and crypto firms being more and more regulated, right? That is like the base, the baseline, the bare minimum, that you are contactable, that you are there on the website, that people can come and talk to you, and can file complaints, or if they lose their money, they can directly come to you, right? You seem to have had this approach from the very beginning. How did you come up with that approach? Like, what was behind it?
I mean, at the beginning it was really it was our own demand. It was almost self-driven because we saw an imminent need in the market for trust and reputation, especially in those early days. I mean, there were a lot of hacks, a lot of association with, drug dealers and money launderers, as if this would have been the entire market in itself. And that was also then in the broader media communicated a little bit like that. So the perception was actually quite bad of crypto back in the days. And what we try to do is really, step in and really show our face, and provide trust and reputation at the end in this some sort of anonymous kind of society or ecosystem. And we also said if this technology should leave a little bit its dodgy path behind and reach some sort of a mass adoption level, then it's absolutely crucial to have this kind of trust and reputation element, and then later on also the regulatory perspective, because we actually realized at the beginning already when we came into or had the idea to do some kind of financial intermediary services, and once we decided to do this on a more professional level, we then also reached out to lawyers and actually said, hey, what is the impact of our business? And while the original or the first kind of replies were, yeah, Bitcoin is not really an asset and it's like nowhere to put it or to associate it to, and but it might be wise to be part of a self-regulation authority, they then said. And then later on we had a clearer decision then taken, because we proactively approached the Financial Market Authority because we wanted to operate a Bitcoin ATM, those old kind of Lamasso ATMs that look like a computer screen from like the 80s, and they were quite popular.
With Windows CE running on them.
Exactly. and they were quite popular, especially in the US. And then we said, yeah, this could also be nice here, because people, still nowadays, but especially in the early days, they said, yeah, Bitcoin is so digital and I don't understand it. And as soon as you had like a physical machine there where you can enter like 20 Swiss francs and actually get some Bitcoin out, then
you can
touch
it. You can touch it, right?
You can touch it, right? So it was like easier to explain, even though it's a little bit absurd. But nevertheless, we then proactively asked the Financial Market Authority what is their opinion if we would operate or if we would run these machines. And then we said, yeah, we would like to start with them in a couple of weeks. And then they proactively, or actually quite fast, came back and said, yeah, we kindly ask you to not operate those machines until further clarifications are made. And then we, or our lawyers, then challenged that a little bit and tried to understand what exactly is needed. And then they basically confirmed the original idea that we need to be part of a self-regulation authority that on their end is also directly supervised by the Financial Market Authority. So it's like an indirect supervision. And then we took this as a task because we said it's absolutely mandatory to be regulated if we really want to do this business professional. And then we managed to become a member of that self-regulation authority, where usually asset managers, brokers, and so on are also members of. And that was actually the first time a new kind of crypto firm put themselves under an existing regulatory body, and that also internationally. So that for us, I think also for crypto in general, was quite a major milestone.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because many companies at that time were running away from regulation, right? It was more of a, we don't really want to be regulated. You chose to self-regulate very early on. And how do you balance basically getting regulated and having rules imposed, or, self-imposing certain rules and controls on yourself, with, on the other hand, the philosophy of DeFi, right? Decentralization, or decentralized financial services. Where is the meeting point between those two approaches, because they're very different, right?
It's a good question, and at the end of the day, I think one doesn't rule the other out. Regulation, in our perception, and as you mentioned, a lot were actually running away, or I wouldn't even say they were running away from regulation, but they just didn't have it on their radar or on the agenda. They just wanted to scale up and grow, and probably also domicile themselves in, let's say some weird jurisdiction somewhere, where probably regulation is not the number one priority. But we said, again, if you want to reach some sort of a mass adoption, and if you want to have a broader understanding also in the overall public kind of community, because they still had some kind of difficulties to understand the concept, and it was difficult to engage with a broader community at that time. And we directly saw regulation as an enabler for that. And to answer your question, regulation versus decentralized systems or DeFi, it's a good question, of course. And while the regulation is absolutely a key mandatory thing, the decentral aspect can be, applied by technology at the end of the day. But also there, what we're seeing, for example, now with Ethereum and certain kind of platforms in staking, even though you have a decentral technology, it can also be centralized through nodes or through miners or so on. So I think the technology in the long run will certainly win, but I don't think that it goes at the cost of regulation, as long as they're of course meaningful and go hand in hand. So I think both can coexist, and while the decentral part is probably more the libertarian kind of anarchistic approach, at the end of the day you also need to be reasonable and realistic, right? And if you want to go out of that kind of niche and really go into financial applications and systems that we're currently building, I mean, as a crypto ecosystem in general, then I think regulation is absolutely key, and there is no way around it. But of course, we also need to fight against nonsense kind of regulation. At the end of the day, it's about customer protection. Sometimes you even need to protect them from themselves, from bad decisions. You need to cast out all the scam projects, Ponzi schemes, and whatever kind of projects are around there, right? So that's why I think it is important, but it needs to have some sort of a balance.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you this question. So I'm quite familiar with the, let's say, governance system of Switzerland. And I heard at one of the conferences, actually, I think that was Crypto Valley or might have been another, but one of the speakers, I believe actually Cyrus from Swissborg, was saying that Switzerland is kind of a DAO already, right? And that direct democracy with governed by referendums every couple of weeks or a couple of months, with people basically having a say and having that sort of level of maturity where they take responsibility for their collective decisions. Do you feel like Switzerland is a bit of an exception here, where perhaps the rest of the world will see this sort of dynamic of centralized versus decentralized playing out in a much more frictionful manner, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. It's a very interesting comparison to a DAO, and it actually might almost be the case. It's also, I mean, the entire federalistic principle of Switzerland, with the 26 different cantons that are quite independent, and they have their own kind of rules and nitty-gritty details, and different tax regimes, and the direct democracy. I mean, it's an interesting concept that somehow one could also see similarities in DAOs, or actually decentral systems in general. And that was actually also one of the reasons the founder Niklas, he originally comes from Denmark, and when he decided, once he was fascinated by Bitcoin and the white paper and so on, he decided to start a venture, build a company in that space. He thought that Denmark is not as startup friendly as probably some other jurisdictions, also with a high tax or crazy tax regime and so on. But he then looked around, and actually what he liked originally about Switzerland was actually the idea of it being quite decentralized and federalistic in that sense. So I think it goes hand in hand, and the mindsets are quite similar. Maybe it's actually also not a coincidence in that sense that Switzerland was so proactive when it came to adoption and to regulation of crypto as well. And one thing that people often forget is that the Swiss Federal Council, like the highest political body, already in 2014 published a paper with their opinion on decentral applications, or actually on cryptocurrencies in that sense. So that was super early, of course.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was super early, 2014. I mean, even though they said, it probably will not be as relevant, and normal market rules apply, and it probably doesn't need a special regulation for it. Last year we introduced new laws in Switzerland actually exactly for that. But nevertheless, it showed from the highest political body an extreme commitment toward that, and also gave a little bit trust back as well to the market. If they actually spent their time in publishing something and discussing that already in 14, let's say it's quite early and quite a statement.
Yeah. No, that's really. I'm gonna have a read of that. I think I like to go
Would be
back.
funny probably to read it now. Yeah, 6 years later. No, actually 8 years.
Yeah, no, that's I completely did not know about that. But so you have other interesting examples of working directly with governments or authorities, like even at the local level in Zug, where you're headquartered. So you're piloting a payments project. I'm very because I'm a payments geek. Okay, I've been in this space for 15 years, and my sort of aha moment was when I was able to pay with Lightning Network for a fish taco in Miami, right? Because the environment was made safe for that transaction to take place. You guys are doing this for public services, I think, to pay in crypto in Zug. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Sure. Yeah, it goes a little bit hand in hand with overall the Swiss early ecosystem back in the days when we started our venture. And I mean, Bitcoin Suisse is being the first kind of entity here and on the local market, slightly after us, or maybe 1.5 years later, the early Ethereum team actually came here, but then also brought some momentum and innovation, and also broader community to the local crypto ecosystem, if we can already were able to call it like this back in the days. But then at one point also the city of Zug and the canton, they became aware of this kind of innovation and hub, and something is happening here. And then they proactively approached us as the first and oldest company here, and they said, "Hey, there's a lot of innovation and momentum here. A community is building up. How can we support you?" And that was actually quite a nice approach from their side. And we said, I mean, we're happy. Zug is a beautiful place, has a nice lake, low taxes, and so on. So we were actually happy. But we said, if you really want to show a signal at the end of the day, and just accept Bitcoin as a means of payment, and that was exactly the time back in days when, like, I don't know, a local bakery or whomever accepted Bitcoin, then they were like all of a sudden Forbes and WordPress and so on. So they said, yeah, can you support us in doing that? And we said, yeah, you probably would need some kind of a tool that can instantly convert Bitcoin if somebody pays with it, because you probably don't want to hold that in a long run and so on. And then they said, yeah, can you build something like that? And in a couple of nights, then we sat together, how could this work? And we built some sort of a payment gateway system that actually does replicate an amount that you can type in, and it provides a QR code with the amount in Bitcoin that or is reflected in Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, we do the instant conversion in the background, and the city of Zug then received not Bitcoin but Swiss francs as a means of payment. But as you can imagine, 2015 or so, and when we introduced that, the demand for that kind of service was not too big, let's put it that way. There was like a handful of transactions, and half of them were test transactions from Bitcoin Suisse. So it was not really a killer application or new business case, but the signaling effect it had was like stellar. And also the former mayor from Zug told us one day that this had like a marketing impact for them of around 20 million US dollar. So money that they would have had to spend alternatively on media and marketing and so on. And then they were invited to like universities, different councils, politicians around the globe. And that had a super strong signaling effect. And it was also a catalyst or an enabler then to bring a broader community to Zug, because every kind of crypto firm at that time that wanted to start a venture, or a project group that wanted to really build up an own company, then they had Zug on the radar. And probably they didn't even know what is the capital city of Switzerland, but they knew Zug. And we had people from around the globe here. That was quite an interesting momentum at the time.
That sounds great. That's really and so is that
by now you can even pay taxes here. So
so is that like a common thing now? It's like, can you pay for public services in Zug now with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean the acceptance increased, and then later on also lawyers or accountants and consultants, big four firms even, that supported us and actually had crypto clients as well. They were also interested in having this kind of payment gateway and that service, which we then later on actually with a partnership with Worldline, who's the biggest acquirer for credit card terminals, or supplier as well in Europe at least. They also said, yeah, how can we accept cryptocurrencies? And then we did a partnership with them in 19, and this is now also in a rollout phase with potentially having access to 85,000 merchants just in Switzerland, including online shops and so on. And that, of course, then pushed it from a little bit a sandbox kind of local community setup to something something more scalable and with substance.
Very nice. Very, 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 very cool. So just talking about payments for a moment. So obviously Bitcoin itself is slow, clunky, gas fees are huge, lightning network, right? And the emergence of it. What's your perspective on that sort of layer 2 solution versus Bitcoin itself being used for payments?
I mean, in my point of view, it's a direct, it's a evolving of the technology. It's developing. That's also nice. So Bitcoin is not as stiff as some people might think, while it of course tries to keep the robust core technology in itself, and it has to be a little bit conservative as well when it comes to like following every trend and so on, because at the end of the day, that's also the value, my point of view, of Bitcoin, that you have something stable and also over the time. But nevertheless, you can adopt to new technologies, like as you mentioned with SegWit, the update to Lightning, or with Taproot recently, even opening the scope even further to like more complex transactions. So that's super interesting. And at the end of the day, I think the layer 2 solutions are needed to actually scale further, and to actually also speed up the innovation cycle and also velocity at the end of the day. So I think they are needed, while the core and base technology should remain robust and probably also a little bit boring. Those technologies on layer 2 exactly have the potential to really exploit the full potential, and maybe also to come back to the original claim of having some sort of peer-to-peer digital cash, and to actually also use it in payments, because the transaction speed was always a little bit a limiting factor, and then also transaction cost, of course, depending on what kind of markets you're in. And sometimes Bitcoin or also ETH transactions was like completely insane, and you would never use it to pay a coffee if you have to pay like 5 times the amount of the coffee in transaction fees. So
and then you have to wait for confirmation, like for 7 confirmations, right? I was recently pondering again, as I'm sure many geeks around the world are, the sort of the trilemma of crypto, right? So decentralization, scalability, and security, right? So those layer 2 solutions tend to go towards scalability, right? So increasing speed and reducing complexity and potentially reducing fees as well. But at what cost? I mean, are we now diverging from that sort of idea of decentralization and keeping some of that, a focus on security, obviously, because these are all highly secure networks. But how does that now diverge from the original vision of, crypto as a decentralized means of exchange or exchange of value, which we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation? So, what's your take on that?
I think it heavily depends between the different blockchains and protocols, and they tend to have different kind of priorities and also, let's say, own visions and missions for the future. And while a lot, of course, are trying to ramp up the scalability and to compare with Visa amount of transactions and so on, if this is a relevant comparison, I think it really goes down to what is the core and the value proposition of each and every individual protocol. And I think it's good that some focus on security, others might go more into the scalability sector, decentralization. I mean, that's right. I mean, it is a trilemma. So, and while some new projects maybe claim to solve it, I still think it exists as a trilemma, and one needs to focus. Also, for example, us as a firm, we also cannot do everything at the same time. We have so many great ideas and opportunities on a daily basis, you also need to set focus, because if you try to solve everything at the same time, it completely gets diluted and your value proposition gets weaker.
You solve nothing for anyone.
Exactly.
If you try
At the end, you have
right?
like a mediocre solution for everyone, and if that is your goal, then maybe you can solve it. But
Yeah. So you are actually diversifying your product offering. So you have a all-in-one custodial staking service now. 2 billion in the 7 stakeable currencies. What's your view on staking overall, right? How where does it work and where does it fail?
yeah, it's a good question. I think staking as a concept and as a new, let's say, sort of consensus mechanism is certainly interesting, especially to also tackle a bit the whole ESG debate and proof of work. Even though I think both can coexist. I'm also a little mini fan of proof of work to a certain extent. So I think the entire ESG debate in itself is a little bit absurd at the moment, especially if people start to compare the usage or the electricity consumption of Bitcoin with countries and so on. And also if it consumes like 0.1 or 2% of the entire world electricity production, it's a nonsense comparison, because at the end of the day, you need to understand how electricity networks work, right? And also with the electricity consumption, at the end of the day, it always depends on what kind of electricity you're using, what is the source. And also an electricity network is not an efficient network. So like 35% of the entire production is lost just by transporting electricity. So if something consumes 0.1 or 2%, I mean, you can debate if it's good or not, but at the end of the day, you should try to make the network a little bit more efficient. It would also help. But to answer the question, I think staking is a more modern consensus mechanism that can probably reach the same kind of decentrality. But as we have also seen, it doesn't need to be the case. So you can also have quite a strong central effect at the end of the day in a decentral system. Where that will go, we will see in the future. It's still very young technology, but a lot of the bigger protocols that started in the last couple of years, of course, have chosen this slightly more modern mechanism, and I think they will coexist in the future. But at the end of the day, I mean, staking, if you have some kind of a nonsense protocol with weird token economics and so on, and just because it offers staking, it's not a superior technology or platform at the end of the day, especially also if you look at the value development of its token. If you have more token at the end of the day, but if it completely goes to zero, crashes, or doesn't really have a value proposition, and also staking itself doesn't solve the problem at the end of the day. So I think it can go hand in hand and enhance a good project, but yeah, it's not the one and only thing.
Yeah. No, I would completely agree. And then just looking at so we talked about the future a little bit of staking and other projects or angles for crypto and the decentralized community, I guess. So as an intermediary, right? So the guy that sits in the middle, right? What is your sort of longer term vision for non-technical innovations around Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies? And how do you play a role, right? Or intermediaries like yourselves play a role in that sort of innovation process?
It's also a good question. While we have quite a strong tech team within our firm, we don't really consider ourselves as an innovator in terms of developing new kind of technology. Of course, we build most of the systems we're currently using in-house. But I think the innovation at the end of the day will come from the startup kind of garage companies really developing core infrastructure and the technology at the end of the day. Our mission is at the end of the day not the innovation and development of new protocols or blockchains and so on, but to really see what is out there. What do our clients want? Because we also have a little bit the who is who of the crypto community as clients, and they are so close to the technology, to the development and so on. And my mission at the end of the day as a chief clients officer is to listen to clients, because I don't have a glass bowl here on my desk, but our clients are usually a good indicator where the market is going to in the next couple of years, and they have a lot of demands. And there I see the innovation on our side to really have that kind of dialogue to see where they need our services in the future. What can we do now to provide that in the future? And then to be innovative when it comes to developing a product or a service offering that on the other side also fits not just the identity of the firm, but also our environment that we're in from a regulatory perspective and so on as well, because we cannot just follow every trend that is out there in the market, as flashy and funky it might be. I mean, we're also a bigger firm by now, and we have also responsibility, especially when it comes to security of assets from clients, for example, and that cannot be jeopardized, also not by a flashy or funky protocol that certain clients might want. So we really look what is out there in the market and try to replicate that into reasonable products and services that we then can offer to our clients in a very robust and professional way. So
that's a very sustainable approach, I would say, to innovation.
hopefully.
That's no, I would definitely say that. So just as a final point, any ideas or any projects that you can share Bitcoin Suisse is currently involved in when it comes to institutional investors or in the institutional space as a whole?
I mean, there is a lot currently being developed. Also now, while we're in the crypto winter, it's not the first crypto winter for us. We have survived many of them, and it's also actually super valuable year for us in terms of value creation for the firm, but also ramping up the baseline when it comes to systems, processes, people, and so on. So for finally, after a couple of years of bull run and craziness, we now have some time to really ramp up again, and it's our responsibility to get ready for the next kind of growth phase, and when the bull run starts to kick in again. And as part of that, of course, we were developing.
When do you think that's going to be? Sorry.
$1 million question. I mean, while I would say it's already flat for quite a while, and I still think it will continue for at least another, usually pessimistic, but 12 months, I would say. It's at the end of the day irrelevant, because what happens in the crypto market at the moment is so heavily correlated to the traditional financial markets and to the macro situation in general. And with the war situation, with COVID that we had, with supply chain issues, with resources and so on, all of that correlates. And there is quite some fear in the markets, and people are not really, they don't really know where that is going to. So they're not too keen to enter new kind of market, especially if it's crypto. So especially if they waited also like 10 years plus to go in. Now is definitely not the moment for new clients to come in and say, now I want to diversify, buy some Bitcoins. But the point will come for sure, and it still needs some time. And we need to, of course, have a close eye on what is happening around the globe, outside of the crypto world, also with crazy inflation rates and so on. But at one point, that might be actually a catalyst for crypto as an asset class. So I'm bullish in the long run, but we still need to be a little bit patient.
Good. Just going back to your question that I interrupted on like what you're brewing as Bitcoin Suisse.
I actually tried to circumvent that answer, but you helped me with that.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
You helped me with that. No, I mean we're working on a lot of different topics, and you mentioned it at the beginning. Institutional is a little bit the word. While our client base was extremely, let's say, retail driven from the earlier days on, because there were no institutionals. Nowadays it completely changed, and the counterparties and the people we're currently talking to is just like unbelievable, and would have been unbelievable a couple of years ago. So while we're in a crypto interface, a lot of the big corporates, banks and so on, they're really ramping up, and they are super bullish on crypto. They're committed long term, and that will provide a lot of interesting products and solutions also in the future. That being said, not revealing too much, but stay tuned, and there will be some news for sure in the future.
We will, for sure. We will. Thank you so much, Andrej. You are, I think, not even a legend. You're a trailblazer, a pioneer, which makes you a legend automatically. So it was a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you. And stay tuned for more legendary tales as we bring you those most inspiring stories of crypto legends of Web3. Crypto Legends is to be back. Thank you so much.